The other thing is again, you can use the buyer representation agreement, have the seller acknowledge it, and then instruct the closing cost portion of the contract, purchase and sale agreement, commission paid by the seller. Title will follow those instructions.
And of course, the other great thing about doing the one-party listing is you get both sides on the stats and
But the
MLS.
stats, yeah. And it's good for comps. We need the comps when we have low inventory.
Absolutely.
We need those comps to help justify value and appraisals.
So if you're doing a one-party listing, you do it as specific assistance to the seller?
Ms. Steele,
For
I would go
sale-
represent the buyer.
Represent the buyer.
Yeah, for sale by owners, what we've been doing, what I've been doing, is sending, like, doing a pre-listing, or not pre-listing, but a pre-showing to your buyer walkthrough with the sellers, so that you've actually already met the sellers and walked through. You're not just calling them saying, hey, can you pay this commission? And then send over, have them at the same time send an AREC saying that you're representing the buyer, giving them specific assistance, and then for sale by owner commission agreement. So we have a form called the for sale by owner commission agreement that lists the commission right there and they sign it.
And that says right there.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't walk in a house that unless they sign it.
Very good.
So on the contract, if, you know, the commission say 2.5% and the additional makeup for your 3% was, say, $3,000, you negotiate in the additional terms and conditions that the seller pays opposed to, you know, $5,000, you add that $3,000 on for a buyer's closing costs, and where you say, you know, closing costs, homeowners association fees, yada, 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 and or commissions, you outline that in there, because that would be a buyer's cost. Is that okay in there? Because then it's...
Oh, sure. If you've got seller pay closing costs and you want to just put that in there, I don't see any reason why
You're
not.
instructing, you're not negotiating.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
instructions to the title company. That serves as instructions, I think, not negotiating between the two
So if they
parties.
agree to all those
Once
closing
you've
costs,
agreed
it can
to
go
that.
towards the buyer's pay closing costs, which they agree
It
to
wouldn't
pay
really
a
matter,
portion of
you
your
know, it's
commission.
clean also, just on the settlement statement, you know, they're taking it away here and they're giving it back here.
Right.
So that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yes, Jen.
I had this happen, so it might be a stupid question. If you don't have a buyer's rep with somebody, I know it's coming, just get ready. If you don't have a buyer's rep with someone and you.
Wait a minute.
I know, and you're talking, wait for it, and you're talking about commissions, and they say, well, I will either give you your other 0.5% or I'll give your buyer the closing costs they're asking for. As far as fiduciary duty, you have what for the licensing?
Well, I think that's a question each individual agent gets the answer for themselves. I think I know what I would do. I would probably just say the heck with the 0.5% and get the deal done.
It's your buyer's deal, it's not our deal.
Yeah.
I think you present it to the buyer. I mean,
Exactly.
it's the buyer's transaction. You guys, these are not your deals. Remember this, you're not buying the house, nor are you selling the house. You have to take yourself out of the situation. The buyer makes informed decisions. You give them options. You're not the decision maker for the buyer at any point in time during a transaction. The minute you start making decisions for the client, now we're into major risk management conversation. So, I mean, my personal opinion is, if you are of the mind to, and this isn't a right or wrong, okay? I'm kind of like Butch. I would probably just make the deal happen and just say, fine, pay the closing costs. But if you want to fight for your commission, and there's nothing wrong with that either, I think you sit down with your client, you have a conversation, say, here's what the seller's offered. This is your transaction, Mr. Buyer. I just want you to know the negotiating that is happening.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I
They're
mean,
the ones
really
signing
let
the
them make
contract,
the-
so it is their decision. Everybody needs to be absolutely crystal clear on that. And again, this comes back to how you fill out your buyer's loyalty agreement at the beginning.
Ed.
We've had this a couple times, I don't know if anybody's seen this, where they have a selling side bonus. And we had to make a policy in our office that the selling side bonus is diverted to the closing costs for the buyer. Because we didn't want anybody to, we're very conservative in that approach, so we didn't want anybody to come back and saying there was any steering or anything like that. So we always just kick it right over to the closing cost on the buyer. I don't see that very much anymore.
Just
Well,
selling
you're
bonuses?
not going to, and as
You don't
a matter
need
of
it.
Not in
fact,
this market.
this conversation about for sale by owners, guys, understand this is a dialogue that those of us that have been in the business for 7 years or more, this was a conversation we had every single day for about 5 years. Because you will see for sale by owners rise in the spring. They're gonna pop up like mushrooms because the market is hot, the inventory is low, and they think they don't need you. And they don't need you to get an offer on their house. They need you to put the deal together and to protect them. That's your value. So you will see the push, the downward push on your commissions is going to get aggressive very, very quickly. And you will be having the FSBO conversation a lot. I mean, you just take that to the bank.
What happened with the $1 CSO? I know they were trying to block that. Did that ever?
A lot of our agents have been able to block it from their personal IDX feed, but not MLS.
But we got it blocked on KDEP's.
Oh, yeah, KWLS.
Yeah.
Okay. What are we up to, 5? 5.
Have you handled it when new items come up on a reinspection that were not previously agreed to on the repairs amendment?
Yeah, this is something that's been coming up a lot lately, and it's not as black and white as I initially had hoped until I thought this through a little bit. The first answer and the main answer is you don't have to do it. The inspector is wrong to be looking at other stuff. But we had a situation just last week where when the original home inspection was done, the furniture was all in the house. When they did the re-inspect and all the furniture is gone, the inspector saw, I mean, just because he walked into the room, he saw some bare wires coming out of the wall.
He has to.
He has to write this down, right? And the seller's saying, my God, how long are they gonna pick at this? Well, the thing is, any reasonable seller would understand that this is a for real health and safety type of issue, and they've gotta take care of it. I think this is a situation where your negotiating skills and a little finesse come into play. You have to speak with the other licensee and say, good Lord, this is, this has gotta get taken care of. They got little kids crawling around chewing on wires.
They're not your kids.
Oh, they already chewed on wires. You can see
But we have a licensed contractor, licensed bond contractor we use.
Your honor would suffice.
And,
Objection.
What happens when, so you're the listing agent, and you send your contractor in to do repairs, licensed bonded contractor. I told my contractor back in 2004, when we give you a list of repairs, you go and you look at that list of repairs and you tunnel on those repairs. However, he's a licensed bonded contractor as well, making repairs in a house. Every once in a while he comes back and he'll come back and say, Ed, look, the inspector must have missed this, we must have missed this. We've gone back and had to go back to the table with the seller and say, there's a repair that the contractor done. It's kind of love it or list it type thing where what you name contractor always finds crap that costs more money to do it.
That's a really good point, Ed. We've had a situation like that come up kind of to the reverse, twice last week. And the repairs are agreed on, the contractor goes into the house and starts calling the listing licensing and saying, oh, you don't need to do this, this is fine. And so he actually called the seller and told the seller that. And so the seller's then saying, well, I'm not gonna do that stuff now. Does anybody know how that turned out?
Yeah.
I do.
The seller agreed.
Nate does, yeah. The seller's already agreed to do it, he's gotta do it. And I would, if you're not real familiar with your contractor, I would have a conversation first that like, that's a no-no, don't do that. If you think something like that, please call me, right? Any questions on that? Cool. Moving right along.
Number 6. What are the most common pitfalls of working with both buyer and seller? How should the ARECs be filled out?
Okay, this is saved for last because I figured this one will take the longest amount of time. This is like a whole class. First of all, I'd like to hear from some of the experienced agent. Bob, what are some of the problems you've had when you're on both sides of a contract? Some of the things to really watch for.
Well, you're going to be neutral, or you're going to be representing one, or you're going to be assisting the other.
Okay.
I like doing that if I'm the listing agent because I've already made a commitment to the previous guy. There's different rules of thumb about it. I'm very transparent. I actually introduce them to each other. Very important. And everything's totally transparent. So thank goodness I've never, in my memory, got into harm. So I'm looking at dating for using as a moral compass.
I think something Bob just said there, you said it kind of quick, I want to emphasize it. Part of how you decide you're going to fill an AREC depends on who you've really got the relationship with and how long that relationship has been in place. A good example is if you represent a builder and you end up picking up a buyer, you're certainly, and you've sold 30 houses a year for that builder for the last 6 years, my recommendation is you just are representing the seller, period. Okay, and I would have the buyer sign an AREC saying you're representing the seller. I think that's the safest way to do it, and it actually most clearly defines your relationship. Okay?
In other words, it's true.
Yeah. Yes, it is not a material misstatement of fact. Go
We
ahead.
don't do neutralize something anymore, period. We just don't. We represent one and assist the other. It's kind of tricky though when you have a bigger team because you have
Right.
buyer's agents that's built relationships with buyers and they show one of your listings.
Right.
So it goes all the way back to the AREC and how you fill that out in the beginning with the buyer on the buyer side. So what we have our folks do, and I don't know if it's right or not, and please let me know if I'm off base here, is we haven't had that conversation at the buyer's consult with the buyer. If we do see any of our properties that our Walden team lists, we represent the seller and assist you. And this is how we assist you. And I go in and say, look, because a lot of times it's one of the buyer's team or me working with the buyers, and it's Dar and Katie and Tasha working with the sellers. You know, so we get in bigger battles in our office than we do with other agents, just because it is. And we do. And some buyers don't realize that, I mean, they're getting well represented, but not technically represented. But
Yeah. I think that's the
but
perfect
kinda
way to
touchy.
do that, Ed.
It
I
gets
really
really
do.
touchy when you build that relationship with the buyer. So you gotta watch that.
Carry that kind of listing inventory as a team, I think you have to have that conversation in your buyer's consultation.
That was
That you have to, because there's a chance, with limited inventory, if you have a lot of market share, there's a good shot they're gonna see one of your properties.
That was a real benchmark in the growth of Keller Williams Alaska Group, is when I started realizing that this was gonna be, a situation that's gonna be coming up, we're gonna have a lot of inter-team deals. And the way you're handling it is perfect.
An example, you know, as a neutral, I'm working on a deal right now with a duplex, and the seller, or the buyer is an investor. He's also been a contractor for years and years and years, and probably's got some problems. And the seller went on, the buyer went a little bit more time to talk, you know, figure out the repairs, whatever he wanted to find as is or whatever, and maybe a lower price. And our time for the repair amendment was running out. And the seller wanted me to just let it lie, and he was to force the buyer into buying the thing at the previous deal and not extend the repair amendment. Well, you know, as a neutral, I had advised him, you know, we're talking about win-win, we're talking about fair, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, today, if the seller's gonna make a decision today and not be able to wait 3 more days to make his decision, he's gonna terminate the deal. Mr. Seller, is that what you want? Because he wasn't gonna sign the amendment to extend the repair amendment. But in his best interest, he should sign the amendment to extend. I had to talk you into that as a neutral, in order to keep the deal together.
I think it's really important that everybody become really familiar with it, what it actually says on the AREC and the AREC waiver, because there's not very much difference. You need to be able to explain that to your clients.
What's your recommendation when you sign a listing agreement? There's those 2 boxes that the seller has read and signed, the AREC and the waiver, or the next box is that they have only signed the AREC but not signed that waiver. I've seen it done both ways. What's your recommendation for that?
My recommendation is that you should on every listing have both the AREC and the waiver signed.
Okay.
But
Because then if you get a call on, you can't.
Understand again, the seller may opt to not sign the waiver.
Yeah,
Remember,
so,
it's their deal. They may say, I'm not comfortable with you waiving your representation of me. I'm hiring you. I've had sellers say that to me. I hired you because I want you. And that's certainly their right as well, but at least you know, I mean, I agree with Butch, that's the way to go. Just be prepared. You may get pushback, not often, but occasionally.
And that absolutely happens. It's absolutely the seller's right. And again, that's a place where you need to be really familiar with exactly what it says on these. I'm positive that a large percentage of the realtors in Anchorage don't really even know what it says on both ARECs. Go ahead.
What I usually do, well, actually what I do at every single conversation I have with the seller, I sit down and I say, now this sounds kind of silly, but I have to ask you this question. Is it okay with you if I potentially show and sell your home? And they usually laugh and say, well, of course, that's what I'm hiring you for. And that's where I say, well, in that case, if I were to bring a buyer, I would be a neutral licensee.
Yeah, that's a perfect icebreaker because then you can lead into
Ever
how
since
it
we've
works.
had this, I've had one seller who said, no, I want you to represent me only. And it was a young seller, first time she sold something, it was a duplex, she was scared to death. The only time I've ever had anyone not sign it.
Ed?
We do this, and I hope it's right, so tell me.
So make it a vote on intent.
I'm stressed out about this kind of stuff. So on the buyer side, again, if we have a property that we list and it's not covered in the loyalty rep agreement, because Stalker just tests to me, sometimes we'll do a separate AREC just for that house and give it to the buyer just for that house. So we're going to see one of DAR's listings, and they're like, okay, we understand you represent us, or this listing, you assist us. And sometimes we'll mark that block on a separate AREC just for that one house, put the address on it, do all that kind of stuff. And I did that at the last minute. It was one of those things where they were kind of squirmy about it, but I didn't want to violate any of the trust we had with the seller or the buyer, so we did it. And we've only done it once. I just wanted to know if that was a joke.
My thought is that the AREC is more about the relationship you have with the client, and it I mean, I understand why you did that, and it kind of makes sense. Imagining the worst case scenario, which is where I live a lot of the time. I guess I don't really like it because it's about, you know, your relationship with the client and how can that relationship change, you know, from today till tomorrow because you're showing them this one specific house. That's kind of what I think. Yes, sir.
An example, I had my son's condo listed, and I called on it, he wanted to see some other condos also. So on the same AREC, I represent the seller only for my son, and I put for this address, and I put representing buyer only for all other properties on the same AREC.
That's pretty much what you're saying.
Because the relationship really does change.
Yeah, in a
based
situation
on-
like that, yeah, especially
It's
with
one of my big clients,
Mhm.
investment clients, so it's
Yeah.
like we protect at all costs. And I just
Right.
didn't want anything to come back saying you didn't watch that. It's kind of investment.
Which I have a situation or a scenario, so you meet a buyer on your listing, you take them out, you start showing them houses, and now you represent them. And then they say, hey, is that house on 123 C Street still available? And now you're back at that original property.
Mhm.
Should you then be neutral?
Well, what have you got signed with your seller? You probably have a waiver and an AREC, right? So at that point, you have to do some kind of neutral.
And the long usually later would change.
Yeah. Beth, what do you think?
It was so easy in 1974.
But chiseling on those rocks. How do you handle it, Beth? I mean, you do a lot of deals where you have both sides. I just reviewed one of yours yesterday, a little condo.
I know, and it's made me think about that. Should I have done it the way I did it? Because that one actually came, we had somebody that wanted to buy a condo in a specific project. We sent a mailing out, had 2 responses, and we handled this as a neutral. And I've represented the buyer on multiple deals over the years. You know, so I'm kind of like, maybe I really should have been specific
You do
assistance to the
50
seller.
deals a year, say, and how many deals a year do you represent that person on?
This specific
Yeah.
person? Well, over 8 years, probably, 8 deals.
I think being neutral is probably, I would have no problem at all with
But I
that.
did like
Yeah.
6 in the last 2 months. With,
Oh.
you know.
Oh, that's right. These are the 1031 exchanges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's,
Yeah. And we all love each other. I mean, my people met each other
Everybody
a couple
loves
of times.
what's not to love?
Right. Yeah, yeah, but it does make you think, you know? I am gonna go back and read both of those forms again. And,
Did everybody hear that? Well, how long have you had your real estate license?
oh my gosh, this is my 40th year. I beat
Yeah.
Kristen to.
Yeah. Beth has had her license for 40 years, and she's rethinking some of this stuff, gonna reread some of this stuff. You know, these forms and even some of the laws change on a regular basis, people, we gotta keep up with it.
Well, they are, you guys, these are contracts. The contract is an agreement between 2 people. We have had, I know of 2 instances right off the top of my head with 2 licensees who are smart, good realtors who filled in the blank on the listing agreement about the total commission incorrectly.
Yep.
So they filled in the listing agreement and put in seller to pay 3%. So they were just thinking, just moving quick, not paying attention, moving
Over a
quick,
year ago.
put in 3%. what's the seller, what's that contract addressing? The total commission paid, and then you address how much commission you offer out as a marketing piece to the selling side, right? It was an oversight, they flipped through it, but both deals blew up in their face and they came back and walked away with nothing.
Man, that's a good deal.
And they had a signed, they had I mean, there was nothing. And I remember Butch just wrenching his heart out, sitting across the desk saying, I can't help you. And they're angry. They're angry. Well, what do you mean you can't help me? I can't change what's on a signed contract. And those are, just pay
Everybody got
attention
that?
to
You
the
can't
forms.
change what's on a signed contract, right?
Sticker.
These are rookie mistakes.
Which, isn't that what's supposed to? If you're gonna change something on a signed contract, it has to be done on amendment. Right.
Yeah.
You can't cross
Right,
out
exactly.
initially.
Yeah, no cross outs and initials.
You write on a contract,
Yeah.
it's called promoting confusion.
So what?
You write on a contract and have an initial that's called promoting confusion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very content.
Right.
Liz.
What, we had this on a little vacant land deal. What do you do when you have a listing and you have multiple, on the team, multiple buyers that all want to write offers on that listing? Oh, that was like you have, okay, so.
Okay, well, just look at it like, okay, I'm
And
a
like,
broker,
I
right?
have
And
two
supposedly
buyers
I
on
own all the listings. It's kind of a bizarro, antiquated concept as far as I'm concerned. It's the same thing. You just, is the listing in your office?
Yeah, like the Matt Dimick team listing.
Okay, you had the listing and multiple buyers.
Multiple buyers. I had some, John had some.
I would suggest you bring have all the buyers write their best offers and bring them to me or Evan or Jim, Denny.
This is when you go back old school to sealed envelope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong, you don't have to use DocuSign, get old school. A sealed envelope is a great tool that you have that promotes security and it lets the buyer know all offers are to,
Right.
So for the AREX, would you do them all neutral licensing or for all the buyers, let all the buyers know we're representing the seller? I mean, because it was for the most part, not even meeting with buyers, it was online leads and phone calls, I'm ready to write this offer, it's such a cheap piece of land.
Mhm.
I'm thinking, something like that happens again, you would be representing the seller.
Yeah,
So
I would.
specific
That's where the
assistance.
relationship is.
Yeah.
represent the
Yeah.
seller. If the internet leads coming across and people are just calling saying,
Right.
hey Butch, can I write an
Right.
offer? You have no relationship with
never
that
even met
person.
the
You
person.
don't, you're not fostering that, you're neutral. I mean,
See-
you're specific, wow. I mean, you're not representing the buyer.
We do neutral
You guys
licensing a
did-
lot in our office and, or on our team rather. And I'm actually rethinking that whole thing because, at the end of the day, the seller's paying the bill. So shouldn't you get something for that? So I think
But again,
representing the seller,
What, okay, who wants to tell me what's the difference between neutral and representing?
very little.
What is it?
What's the difference?
The terminology.
Price.
No, you're not allowed to tell.
No.
Disclosure. Yeah.
Mark, say that again.
Two things.
You can't tell either one what the other one will do about their price.
Right.
Right. It's still, what's the second thing?
You just
He said he
provide
didn't
them information to make the decision.
Okay, so it's really just two things. And it's really critical that you guys know that really deep inside so you can explain that to your client when you're having discussions, before in contract and when you get into contract.
Well, that's
What
that
is the
additional.
buyer expecting? What is the buyer expecting? Are they expecting that you're gonna counsel them through an offer? Or are they expecting that you're gonna give them information and say, make an offer? Those are two very different conversations. Just putting, you can say, here, I can give you information, here's comps. You guys can look at them, you can study at them. I'm not advising you, I'm not counseling you. I'm just giving you information. What would you like to offer? I am the scribe. I'm writing it down.
One of the most dangerous questions a buyer can ask you in that situation is, what should I do?
I can't
Don't
tell
answer
you.
that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Buyer, I cannot tell you what you should do. I can provide you information.
I would-
And it's the buyer's right to, I know trust me, I mean, march to $1 billion. I want you guys getting all the business that exists out there. I'm all for that, but I also don't want you standing in front of a judge. And, this judge is okay. But understand, I mean, here's the question you always have to think. You are the real estate professional. You are a licensed realtor. You have an occupational license given to you by the state of Alaska. The burden will always be on you of responsibility The question will always be, if I'm standing in court, what will a judge say? That's, whenever you gotta think through those from that perspective.
That's good.
When I get somebody that asks me, you know, what should I do, I think it's my job as, you know, their consultant to ask them enough questions to get them to come to the realization of what they want. Because I finally find that they will blame you for their own decision that they know in their head that they've made. So I don't know, here's the comps, what do you think? These homes, this is sold, how much do you think you should offer? This is what the numbers are telling us.
Exactly.
Get them to always come up with that answer. Even if I am in full representation, rarely do I ever say, no, this is it. And then you make a joke out of it. I say, you know, I could tell you to offer $20,000, you know, more or less, or whatever the direction is, or full asking price. But you're always gonna do what you wanna do, and then my job is to represent your interest in what you want. So let's look at the numbers, and I bring it back to that.
Nate?
I think when you're building expectations for making the offer too, I mean, pull that TMO out. I mean, you wanna make the offer for 10% under, you know, the average house is selling for 99.6% of the listed price. Perfect. That's your decision. That TMO is, I mean, huge.
Valuable tool.
And then, I don't know if this is right, but for the home inspection, if someone asks you, what should I do? That's one of the big scenarios you have there. I usually just say, you know, in many instances, some people will ask, or I throw examples out there that I've had in the past. A lot of times a bank might want to have health and safety done, and I just throw that out there. Are there any health and safety items?
I also think that's something you touch on when you do your buyer's consultation. When you're talking about the chronology of events and all the stuff that's going to occur, when you're talking about the home inspection and your buyer's consult, you say, this is what you can expect the seller to be willing to do.
I always find it hard.
Customary. I like the word customary, that, you know, in this market, we see that it can be customary for the seller to perform life and health safety, you know?
Yeah.
It's not required, it's negotiable, but it's fairly customary. I wouldn't use the word standard, because that implies an industry standard, and you know that it's the buyer and the seller negotiating, and there's no standard that we can enforce on either party. But customary is a good word to use in that expectations conversation.
Yeah, I think neutral licensee, that's a touchy subject, because I mean, I know I can be, a lot of people I work with I know well, so I'll be real pushy with them and when I'm representing them, and I always have to step back, and I always think about it, and like you said, you know, what would a judge say, what would an attorney say? You have to really step back and just say, you know, here's the information. And it's tough being a neutral licensee, and you really have to be really careful what you say.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Stick around for profit share, just stay put. We'll take 2 minutes to